from point of inquiry, a customer has said, I'm interested in this development. What is it exactly that they're interested in? Is it the architectural detail? Is it the layouts of those apartments? Is it the light? Is it the communal areas and the spaces?
I'll be honest with you, usually is I know what I want or I don't know what I want. And sometimes when it's you know what you want, but you know what you want a bit too much, it's almost like, okay, so why am I here? But you know, I guess there's the project management element of interior design.
This is the Property Development Book Club podcast. Please be advised that the views expressed are of the individuals and do not represent their employers and should not be taken as advice. Please do your own research and seek advice from an appointed professional.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of the Property Development Book Club podcast as part of season 3. Today we are discussing interior design and individuality and how that plays out across the housing market from private homes to larger developments as well. My name's High McEwen, I'm a director at Office S&M Architects, and today I'm delighted to be joined by two very special guests who are going to introduce themselves. Teni.
Thanks, Hugh. My name's Teni and I'm a London-based interior designer. I've been doing interior design for 4 years now and I work on commercial and residential projects. I would say that my style is modern classic and I really do believe there is beauty in simplicity and I try and push that with any project that I work on.
And we're also joined by Toyin.
Hi Hugh, my name's Toyin and I'm a sales marketing professional. I've been working in the property sector now for over 20 years and most recently I founded my consultancy business, which is TF Property Consultancy, supporting developers to maximise profits and enhance their customer experience.
Great. So Teni, so Studio Teni, the company that you founded, is dedicated to bespoke transformations, but you know, many London homes are also sold as blank canvases to attract a kind of wider market. How would you, or how do you encourage homeowners to make bolder design choices that reflect their personalities in the work you do?
Yeah, I agree. Most homes are sold as blank canvases, but if you go to like a development or new houses that have been developed, there's always a show home, and that just proves that that is the selling point, that interior design is really important. And the reason for the show homes is to show the potential buyer, this is what your house can look like. Sometimes just seeing the blank space just isn't enough. And the show home is an opportunity for the developers to show the potential buyers that, you know, this is how you can design your home and this is what the space could look like. So I really, really do feel like interior design is really important when selling homes. Even though the homes are sold as blank canvases, the interior design is what sells the home. Yeah.
That's interesting. And from your perspective, Toyin, sort of from that kind of selling perspective, do you think that kind of personalization, that ability to kind of personalize and being shown kind of how that might happen helps a buyer's decision, you know, with show homes, as Teni's mentioned?
I think from a property developer perspective, there's a number of ways that we can personalize the customer experience as well as the product. So for example, you know, from a property developer perspective, you could personalize through the customer journey. So that's from point of inquiry right through, you know, the entire sales process through to, you know, moving into the property. One of the ways I think property developers look to personalise as well is through the specification. So some developers will offer the ability for customers to be able to choose kitchen interiors, bathroom interiors, flooring, and so on, so they can add their stamp and their personality to their home. And of course, you know, in order for most developers across the UK to be able to sell their homes off plan without having stock properties, it's absolutely critical to use show homes as well as sales and marketing suites, because the show home or show homes depending on the scale or size of the scheme, is really about showing customers how that space works. And believe it or not, whether you're a first-time buyer or whether you are, an investor, it's really important for you to see what can be done with that space. And generally with furnishings, I would say that, the homes tend to look a lot bigger than they are. So, and sometimes I think, particularly with first-time buyers, they find it very difficult to visualize how the space should, where their sofa should go, where the wardrobe should go, where the bed should go. So I think, the interior design is about not only adding personality, but it's functional to kind of highlight the features of the home. So yeah, it's absolutely beneficial.
And do you think sort of with that process you were talking about, kind of being able to customize the spaces and sort of choose things, do you think that sort of people respond better to those spaces which are a bit bolder or have more of that kind of input on them, or is it something where people would prefer something that's a little bit calmer, and then they can then kind of put their stamp on?
I think definitely with new homes, most people would agree that sometimes there's a uniformity, in design, certainly architecturally, and sometimes even, through specification. And I think that generally for when you're developing homes, you've got to make sure that it's neutral. You've got, as well as, meeting kind of the trends in specification that's out there, but certainly it needs to be neutral so that it can meet a number of target audiences and a number of different customer aspirations. So, you can't afford to be bold, but the interior designer aspect, so having the show home, is really where you're speaking to the target audience for that particular development, for that location. So it's where you can afford to be a lot more bold. You can afford to have a lot more personality and be dynamic. So so I think it's only through the interior designer that you can, or design of the property, that you can really in some ways go wild and be adventurous.
You're sort of showing what's possible, what you could go on to do.
Exactly.
And I suppose that's where you come in, Teni, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think with the developers allowing customers to pick their own kitchen, pick their own flooring, pick the kind of tiles they want in their bathroom, I think that's really important because, I think there is kind of like a stigma with new builds that it's got like a step and repeat design. So a lot of people don't want to buy a new build, even though it's a new shiny home. It's almost like your house looks exactly like your neighbour's and it looks like everybody else's house, like in the building. So it is nice when developers allow people to pick their own colours and the different things that they'd like in their home, because I feel like, especially since COVID, like renovations have become like a really big trend now. And I think the reason why people love it is because you can make a space your own, and you can't really do that with a new build. But then at the same time, I feel like if you're going to go plain or simple, it's always best to do it with the base. So even if you do buy a house that's really simple and it's got a very plain kitchen and a very plain bathroom, it's always easier as an interior designer to come in and put your stamp on that space than to go into someone's house who's got like a really quirky kitchen and a really quirky bathroom, because those are the bases of a home. The floors, the paint colors on the wall, if somebody's got like red paint, it's really hard to just tone that down. But with like a new build, if you're going to furnish or style that space, it's very easy to do that because the base is very mute and very silent. So I think that is a selling point when developers are creating those spaces, because it's almost like you can come and put your own stamp on it. And I think that's what the selling point is. Yeah.
I should say though, certainly from a developer point, although you want to offer choice and you want to kind of give customers that personalised, tailored experience when they're selecting and choosing their home, there are kind of challenges with that. And one of the key challenges is that offering choice does have an impact in terms of the delivery of the project, whether it be cost or whether it be potential for mistakes and errors in specification, but also in terms of time. And that's, you know, like you rightly said, since COVID, you know, there's a lot of challenges currently, you know, for developers across the country. So yeah, it's great to offer choice. It's great for customers to be able to personalize their new builds to their own taste. But for some developers, it does have implication for, you know, delivery time and also cost of the whole project.
And I suppose, Teni, if you kind of starting on one of those maybe sort of blanker slate type sort of fit outs, how would you then go about sort of working with people to develop something that feels personal with them? And I suppose on the flip side, kind of what are common mistakes that you see that you think people could avoid?
I'd say I've actually had a few projects where I've had to design a new build home, but what happens with new build homes is it's never a renovation project, it's always a styling project, because everything's so which actually just brings a memory. So 20 years ago, my parents bought a new build home and my neighbours moved in a few weeks later, but they ripped everything out. And my mum and dad were like, that's a brand new kitchen, that's a brand new bathroom. And they were like, it's just not us. But for me, obviously I was very young at the time, I kind of thought, so why don't you just buy an old house then? Why would you buy a new house to just rip everything out again? But I guess if budget allows, you know, some clients where budget allows, it might just be, oh, I just want to change the tiles. For me, I do try and be practical when I'm asked to do these types of projects. So I might say, this is a nice bathroom and the developers have done a fantastic job, but if we just change the tiles, it sounds big, but it's not. You know, you could just get someone to switch the tiles over in one day, and it's not as expensive as you might think it is, and that will make so much difference to the space. So it's about like approaching it from looking at the space entirely and just looking at the little elements that can be changed that will really enhance the overall look. And with like new builds and working on those types of projects, like I said, they're usually just styling projects. So most developers, there's always white walls, laminate flooring, grey or brown or white, maybe kitchens. And as much as it's boring, as an interior designer, I prefer that. I prefer to walk into a base which is really mute, so that I can bring colours in soft furnishing, sofas, cushions, rugs, just bring colour into the space in different ways. It's easier to do that than to walk into a space with a really colourful base. So I appreciate developers for doing that. As boring as it is, it is much easier to work with. So yeah.
And what would you say that some of the kind of common, I mean, are those things like, you know, really brightly coloured rooms or things like that? Are those common pitfalls that you find or kind of problems? Or
I would say that my style is modern classic. You know, and I really do believe there's beauty in simplicity. That is like my ethos. I really believe there is beauty in simplicity. But I know not everybody appreciates that, because sometimes I get like Instagram comments and people say, well, it'd be nice if you just use some colour sometime. I'm like, I do use colour. Or like, it makes me challenge myself to like, maybe I don't use enough colour, or maybe I could use a bit more colour. But I think some people don't really see the beauty in like a simple design, but I have a lot of people that do appreciate it, so I'm fine with it. But I think with a new build, I would always go bolder on like soft finishing, cushion, throws, you know, just there's so many different ways to bring colour into a space without like splashing it all over the walls. That's my personal opinion.
Well, I suppose, like you say, if you've got that background that you can then kind of work on from, you know, then that works, doesn't it? And I think, you know, interior design is kind of sometimes associated with sort of more luxury developments, or it being a luxurious thing to kind of do. But you've also touched on there about, you know, you don't have to change everything, and you know, it's sort of you know, being particular about what you actually need to do. And sort of how do you find that sort of that aspirational versus kind of, you know, budget conscious sort of side of your practice kind of works? How do you find that people sort of interact with those two kind of concerns?
Yeah, I'm really grateful to be an interior designer in a time like this, because once upon a time it was very much IKEA or Argos or extremely high end. And now I feel like the industry has like completely opened up. There are so many stores that sell beautiful furniture and like lots of interior. Even IKEA have stepped their game up, just understanding how the industry is changing. There's so much affordable furniture out there that's absolutely beautiful that there really is no excuse for anyone to like not want to make their home look nice. Or if I have a client that has a very reasonable budget, I'm still able to transform their space without spending too much money, because there's a lot of quality furniture out there right now that doesn't cost too much. And yeah, a lot of it is like copies, so it looks like what's in Harrods, but it hasn't got the same price tag. But I think everybody should take advantage of that.
Absolutely.
Like, yeah, there's so many stores like Dow's and Cult Furniture. There's just so many new stores now that are really, really, I think like their aim is to create beautiful pieces for affordable prices. So I do feel like interior design originally was like, oh, that sounds a bit too luxurious, or that sounds like something that will be out of reach. But now it is really accessible and affordable, I would say.
And Toyin, do you find that comes through in the kind of wider housing market? You know, is sort of luxury sort of more of a selling point, or does it feel as though it is kind of out of reach?
I think definitely, you know, it depends what segment of the market that we're talking about. So I would say for most first-time buyers, that probably is somewhat of a luxury. I think, you know, we're all quite well versed in that currently, you know, it's quite hard for first-time buyers to get onto the property ladder. And affordability, given that affordability is such an issue for them, that I think, yes, in most cases, yes, it is a luxury. But, you know, with most developers, it's something that is often offered because, you know, they do offer furniture packages to support people that, you know, that might find that a luxury item. If you're looking at high-end properties, you know, high-end target audience, as we would say, then I think, yeah, that's kind of a standard protocol that they would expect an interior designer to help them visualize, you know, or to help them kind of meet their lifestyle aspirations. But yes, I think for most of the type of buyers that I've dealt with, certainly in London, and working with predominantly first-time buyers, I would say is a luxury.
And is that where that kind of that process of customization kind of comes in as a sort of halfway house, that you can choose sort of a higher spec or a lower spec sort of as you sort of feel like through that process?
So in terms of the personalisation, that's not something that all developers offer, and it's not, and developers that do offer it, it's not necessarily on all of their developments that they would offer that. So the personalisation often is down to the customer. Most of the time, it's down to the customer. Most developments, certainly you would have, you know, a project team that have kind of gone, you know, into painstaking detail, forensic detail, to offer something that is beautiful, you know, that is neutral and simplistic, and that meets a wide target audience, rather than offering personalisation or a tailored specification to the individual.
So you touched on there kind of about the, you know, the breadth of people you're selling to, you know, and I suppose with London being so diverse, kind of how do you find, you know, the kind of that balance between having something that's of a universal design appeal, but also particular needs or individual needs that people might have? How do you find balancing those two kind of aspects?
I think it is I think the best way to balance it, personally, with most developments is really, if you have the basics, the foundation is good quality and is of good value and of, that's got longevity and that's, been carefully crafted, I think that foundation is probably more important than the choice, as it were, of, having different, I think if you've got really good quality design, whether it's simple, I think that's what most customers are attracted to. They want to know they're investing in a developer that's delivering quality, and they want to be able to say, okay, my washing machine, my kitchen, and bathroom, all of these things that have been carefully put together, and the workmanship is great and it's going to last for a long time. I think fundamentally that's what buyers care about. The element of choice is something that I think as property developers can work harder at providing, but it's a thing between making something that's affordable and accessible to the majority or not. And I think, in this current climate, certainly it's about properties being accessible.
And we talked a lot there. We touched on sort of first-time buyers being like a key sort of part of the market, particularly for new build housing. But Teni, I think from your perspective, kind of how do you lead somebody through the process of redesigning their interiors when they've never done that before? Are there sort of processes or tips and tricks that you kind of use through that?
It's interesting because I have different types of clients. So I have clients that say, here are my keys, I don't want anything to do with it, I trust you, I just need it done by this date. And I love those projects, I'll be honest. I love those projects. So I'm like, yes, I get free reign, I can pick what I want, there's not going to be any pushback. And I won't lie, those are my best projects. But then again, I have projects where, we have weekly meetings with the client and, I have to talk them through every single thing that I'm purchasing for the property. And I'll be honest with you, it usually is, I know what I want or I don't know what I want. And sometimes when it's, what you want, but what you want a bit too much. So it's like, okay, so why am I here? But, I guess there's the project management element of interior design as well. But then there are some clients that don't know what they want, like what you're saying, but also want to be a part of the process. It's weird because before I physically start any project, I always create a 3D rendering. So what I would do is I'd look at the space and I always ask the client, do you have like a Pinterest mood board? Is there, and sometimes I'm like, I have to ask, but I'm scared if they said it to me, I hate it. But I have to ask anyway. And sometimes they have it and sometimes they don't. Or sometimes they send me their mood board and I'm like, I can work with this, And I do think there is one key thing is you have to trust the interior designer you've chosen. You've chosen me because you like what I do. You like the designs that I've created. So there is an element of mixing my style with their style. And I do think interior design style, a lot of it is personality. So sometimes in the first couple of weeks of trying to design the space, I may not understand the client too much. They might be a bit more quiet. Some people's personalities are a bit louder. So I might get to that point quickly. But I always feel like I always understand the client's personality. And I'm like, oh, they're a bit more classic. They're a little bit more laid back. Or these people are a bit more, this client's a bit modern. Or they like things a bit sharp and bold. Because when I product source, I always have option 1, option 2, option 3. That's if they're happy to come along the process with me. So I would create a rendering for them and then I would source all the products for the property and then I would send them a spreadsheet with different options and then I would specify my preferred option. But then I still sometimes leave it open to them to decide. And just after 1 or 2 meetings, I begin to understand their style. what they're leaning towards, what they like, what they want their home to look like. And it's just, I wouldn't say it's easy, but you just get to know their style, even just from I feel like interior design really is personality. So I just get to know their personality, I get to understand their preferences, and then once you understand that, it's just so easy from there. So I see a light and I'm like, they're not gonna like that. They will hate that, actually. Then if I present this light to them, they think I haven't been listening. So it always happens naturally. It does happen naturally. So.
And is that where you can kind of bring your professionalism in as well? I mean, Toyin mentioned earlier about kind of, you know, people understanding how the scale of homes and how they're sort of working. So, can you bring that to the table as well?
One of my previous projects was a Georgian townhouse, which was absolutely beautiful, like really nice bones, really high ceilings. And my client just sent me a message before our weekly meeting. Oh, I really like this light. And it was like a flashlight, like almost like stuck to the ceiling. And I was like, well, you're not making use of your high ceilings. You want a light that's going to drop. Like flashlights are for like new builds where the ceilings are so low and you can't afford to have like a hanging light. So I was like, it's a very nice light, but I would use a height with a really long drop because you've got these beautiful high ceilings, which not many people have this day and age. And I was like, oh yeah, that's true. So, you know, you have to be professional and give like your advice. I wouldn't say, oh, that's ugly, don't be silly, you know, but my truth was, you've got really high ceilings, it would be a shame to waste it. So just kind of guiding them in that type of way is also really important. And sometimes it might be, I don't want a light in that room, I prefer to have spotlights. And I'll be like, oh, well, again, you know, you're not making the best use of the space. Or it could be the other way around. I really like this light and I'm like, your ceilings are not high enough for this light. Or it could be flooring. They want really dark flooring, but it's a very small space, you know. Okay, if you're going to go with that flooring, then it might be better to go lighter on the walls because the space is so small. We don't want to like make everything too dark. And I guess a huge part of it is your clients really trusting you and really understanding that you know what you're doing and you can't just shut them down each time. So if they do come up with something that doesn't make any sense, it always has to come with like an explanation. And most times, I would say all times, they're kind of like, oh, that's true. I didn't think about that, but that's true. What you're saying is right. So, yeah.
And Toyin, in terms of that kind of, that experience, that advisory service, I suppose, you know, you've sold hundreds of homes across London, and now with your background and through your consultancy, you're helping developers to kind of optimize their processes, their incomes, and kind of how their developments are being brought forward. How do you feel that you kind of bring that experience sort of to the clients that you're working with, and then how do they see benefits for their end sort of sales?
In terms of design of the homes, or
well, also I think you touched on kind of, you know, the experience of purchasing a home as well, and sort of how that process kind of works. I mean, yeah, it'd be interesting to know sort of from a design perspective how you're sort of you're bringing that experience through to other developers, or yeah, in terms of kind of their sales process and sort of how are they delivering things and how can they kind of improve it.
I think the critical thing is, number one, you can learn from the business in terms of, you know, the life cycle of the specification that you've chosen, the design choices that you've made, and you know, so the project team, or you know, can learn from their own experience of that choice. But I think the real learning, or the real beneficial learning, comes from the customers. So often, you know, it's helping developers to really understand from the beginning, from point of inquiry, a customer has said, I'm interested in this development. What is it exactly that they're interested in? You know, not just about location and price, but what is it about this particular development that has caught their attention? Is it the architectural detail? Is it the layouts of those apartments? Is it the light? Is it the communal areas and the spaces? So from point of inquiry right through to customers moving in and living and experiencing their properties, I think you have to kind of capture that data. And some of the data, the best data I think that developers get is really at when customers move into the property, because now this is, you know, their home and they've, you know, everything's settled, and the types of data that you get from the defects that they're experiencing, so when things aren't going quite as well as they hope, is as beneficial as, you know, the good stuff that they say about, you know, this new development that they've moved into and everything's working well. So that information is often fed back to appraising those schemes, and it's often fed back in, you know, making those specification choices. So I think with my consultancy business, the way I aim to support private developers is really for them to understand that end-to-end customer journey, for them to really, for me to be the voice of the customer, to support them in designing a customer experience that ultimately means that their customers are happy with their end product. So that feedback that is often there to be captured is not being captured sometimes. And I think that my purpose is really to provide them with the tools to be able to do that and make sure that they are providing quality products and making, you know, the revenue and profits that they need.
Great. Well, thank you very much both for your input today and discussing, you know, everything from the primary market to the secondary market, and from, you know, being sort of blank canvases through to being bold, and how interior design massively impacts on people's experience of spaces and how they live and how they can make a home. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Building dreams we can. In the privacy, we're racing up the road.